Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. It's Ukraine War news update. First part thereof for the 26th of February 2024. Let's go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to this video below. Now, 880 personnel lost is about where it's been for the last few days, below the 1,000 that we have seen, or over 1,000. 13 tanks, 37 armoured personnel vehicles, and 12 artillery systems. So not the biggest numbers in, say, the tank and artillery systems, although 13 tanks, to lose 13 tanks in the day is pretty careless. 37 APVs is a pretty big loss in that category. We've got one multiple launch rocket system and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That would be good for the Ukrainians. And then 26 vehicles and fuel tanks and 2 pieces of special equipment. So I guess in some respects, somewhat average, a few categories showing some heavier losses for the Russians. When we go to Andrew Perpetua's loss stats, we can see it's another day where the Ukrainians haven't reached the kind of 3-to-1 Russian to Ukrainian loss ratios that they would prefer, and it's almost at parity. It's you know, a little bit in favor of the Ukrainian losses, but not enough. We have of the Ukrainian losses, radio station, surveillance and comm station taken out. We do have RM-70 Vampire. That's a multiple launch rocket system that is, I think, provided by the Czechs. We've got Caesar. That's a damaged self-propelled gun that I actually showed you yesterday. And then a couple of tanks, BTR APCs and a Humvee, and some Loafs, SUVs, cars and whatnot. So not crazy high value stuff. I don't know the value of that radio station, but they won't like having the Caesar damage and the RM-70 lost. For the Russians, I wouldn't include that Supercan drone, but you got a D-20 artillery piece. That's a pretty old bit of kit. T-80, T-72, B-3M. You've got, again, a large number of infantry fighting vehicles ranging from the BMP-1 through to the BMP-3 and some BTR-82s as well. That will hurt them a little bit. They are chomping through infantry fighting vehicles at the moment. A few APCs and some trucks and civilian vehicles. So not a great deal of high-value equipment for the Russians, just quite a bit of it. For the Ukrainians, the Caesar and RM-70. So lots of talk about what Zelensky said yesterday in terms of having lost 31,000 troops. So Zelensky says that 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since Russia invaded during the two-year war. He told a news conference in Kiev that he could not disclose the number of wounded because it would help Russian military planning. 31,000 troops have been killed in this war, not 300,000, not 150,000. Putin is lying there, but nevertheless, this is a big loss for us. Now, they haven't put a number on these losses since, as the article here says, since 2020, ended 2022. So that's a big thing. When Mikhailo Podolyak said 13,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. Lots of conversation about how accurate this is. Many people saying it's surely more than 31,000. It's so difficult. My friend was asking me what is my best estimate of the Ukrainian losses. I just don't know. I don't think there's any easy way of being able to work this out. I mean, you can look at their needs for mobilization, and you could do some kind of calculation that they've probably lost quite a lot of killed and wounded. There are often claims from the Ukrainians that the Russians, from Zelensky himself, that the Russians lost 5 times as many as the Ukrainians. It's just so difficult to know whether these claims are true or not. I mean, their mobilization needs would suggest that they've had some pretty significant losses. If your wounded are at 3-1, 5-1, wounded to dead, then that's going to be throwing another 150,000 onto that, 180,000, and yet they're wanting to mobilize 450 to 500,000. So does that look like it tracks? Yes, they might want to increase the numbers, but I would suggest that they probably lost significantly more Just really difficult to know. On the Russian loss front, losses of Nepali mercenaries fighting on the side of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, according to data from open sources. So at least 16 dead, at least 116 wounded, 272 missing, and 4 are in captivity. There are claims that there are between 14 and 15,000 Nepalese fighting for the Russians. And then if you look at other nations contributing to mercenaries fighting for Russia, you have an issue for the Ukrainians where they are less able to recruit from abroad, from prisons. Russia are just clearly going to every end of the world to recruit troops that they can throw into this fight. And that means that in some sense the Russians have a bit of a competitive advantage over the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have changed mobilization rules to allow foreign fighters to be contracted, I think, into the armed forces more easily. They need to do that. You need to appeal to a foreign legion again to get foreign fighters back into Ukraine. I think they need boots on the ground. There is more footage coming out of various incidents on the battlefield. This is another impressive one where 4 Ukrainian National Guardsmen stopped the assault column near Robotyne. There's a lot of fierce fighting in Robotyne. On February 19th, 4 fighters from the Maori battalion of the 3rd BROP of the NSU Spartan faced an unequal battle against 3 units of military equipment with armoured infantry. This column was moving to Robotyne to reinforce a group of invaders who had settled in the village. A Russian column consisting of 3 BTR-82s advanced towards the western outskirts of the settlement. A battle ensued. The first armoured personnel carrier was blown up by TM-62 mine. Second was hit by an RPG. The third managed to land the infantry, which engaged in the shooting battle with our defenders. Thanks to the courage shown, as well as the support of mortars and artillery, the enemy was stopped and eliminated. The Russians have tried several frontal assaults from the south, but to no avail, since Ukrainian occupy a former Russian stronghold, part of the Surovikin line. At the moment, they tried to bypass it by attacking from the west. As I said, fierce fighting in Robotyne. The Ukrainians are doing a pretty good job of repelling those assaults, but it's probably only a matter of time, really. PS01 here saying it's not going well for the Russians near Robotyne at the moment. Ukrainian FPV drones are a real nightmare. Russians are attacked each time they rotate. And the translation of this Russian source says, comrades report that extremely fierce fighting is taking place in Robotyne area. The Ukrainian armed forces have equipped their positions very well in engineering terms, as a result of which our assault groups cannot complete their combat mission. The enemy's drones are actively operating. In fact, they are grinding our attack aircraft on the way to our positions. Comrades also report that there is no way to take our wounded back from the battlefield. All evacuation groups are immediately attacked by the enemy. This is good news for the Ukrainians. They need as much kind of good news like this as they can get. As mentioned, Robotyne is really, really hot. And the fact that both Russian and Ukrainian sources are showing that the Russians are having a hard time of it is good news. But again, we've seen this many times, and the Russians can just overcome with sheer mass eventually. Right, moving on to distance strikes. There's not a crazy amount of news out today in these categories. Distance strikes, there was a pretty busy night in a way last night, as in not a huge barrage of each, but some drones and some missiles sent, and a range of missiles. So air defense had a busy night with a mixed barrage, says Tim White. Russia attacked with 1 Iskander-M ballistic missile, 2 S-300s, 3 Kh-59 cruise missiles, and 14 attack drones. So 9 of the drones were taken out, so 5 drones got through, and all 3 Kh-59 cruise missiles were destroyed. Again, it's this issue with S-300s and Iskander-M, these ballistic trajectories that the Ukrainians really struggle unless they've got Patriots nearby to do anything about. So if you send an S-300 into Dnipropetrovsk or into Zaporizhia city or into here or there, outside of where the Patriots are operating, or the SAMTs are operating, then you're going to get those missiles through air defenses and cause lots of damage. Well, Russian targets the city of Dnipro with Shahid drones, injuring 4 civilians. Dnipro mayor reports destruction of single-family homes, roofs, facades, windows. Ukraine's air defense intercepted 3 cruise missiles and 5 drones over the area, but who knows what drones got through. That's the kind of footage that we see. It's pretty normal, sadly. And then there's this. The attack on Dnipro was covered last night with 10 houses, 3 5-story buildings and businesses damaged. 4 people were injured, says Tim White a bit later. Also, an attack on Dnipro region. Nikopol was badly hit with drones, artillery, and grads. So obviously some kind of logistics area hit there with some trucks very much on fire. And then guided aerial bombs were dropped in Yunakivska community in Sumy region at night. 2 people killed. Regional military administration has said 1 private residential house was destroyed, 5 were damaged. Again, we can see residential houses being hit near the border in Sumy. Now, what you might want to know is that near the front lines, this is a case for both Russian and Ukrainian forces, is that many of the locals will have moved out and abandoned their houses, and Ukrainians, for example, will take on those houses to house their troops, often renting those houses. I mean, I've been in some of these. Like I can tell you what goes on and how these guys live. So I visited them in these houses where they're basically renting, and quite often they'll rent out their own pocket as well. It's quite incredible. But they'll rent these houses off people who have run away from the area. So when residential houses do get hit like this, there's no telling whether it's a genuine strike on a house that they think is being inhabited by military personnel, or it's just a wayward bomb on a residential house, or it's indiscriminate bombing. You know, we just can't tell from the information given, but just to let you know that residential houses on both sides are utilised by the army, especially, particularly close to the front line. Right, the SBU has detained groups of residents in Chernihiv and Kyiv regions who were preparing a drone attack on a Patriot air defense system. They were detained right before already assembling the attack drones. Prior to that, the FSB's task, so the Russian intelligence services, had passed the relevant operators' courses, according to Maliek. So these guys have passed courses probably on drone operation and whatnot, and then we're about to take on hitting a Patriot air defense system before they were luckily caught by the SBU. Now, this is coming from presidential office, from Andrei Yermak from the presidential office, saying no Red Cross representatives have reached any Ukrainian prisoners of war held by Russia, nor any Ukrainian children abducted to Russia. Now, this is basically causing lots of people to really slag off the Red Cross. Red Cross has already come under a lot of pressure for being one of these large humanitarian organizations that ends up not really appearing to do much. Quite often it's people like Greg and Zhenya who are delivering things to the front lines, helping people out, and the Red Cross is just arguably fanning about with a fleet of spotless vehicles that don't seem to do an awful lot, and you see them parked up back in the middle of nowhere. Now, I don't know how justified those criticisms are, but they do come from an awful lot. I've spoken to a lot of humanitarian aid workers from smaller organizations who had nothing good to say about the bigger organizations. But we've also seen the Belarusian Red Cross head who's being complicit in fact, he was being complicit in removing children from Ukraine through into Belarus. These filtration of, basically that's a war crime being assisted by the Red Cross. So yeah, I don't think they're coming out of this conflict looking particularly good, the Red Cross. Zelensky has said that Russia is preparing for an offensive for early summer. Russia is preparing to launch an offensive in Ukraine in spring or the start of the summer, according to Zelensky. Well, I don't quite understand that personally, because they appear to be doing an offensive right now. I mean, literally in Avdiivka, Bakhmut, Robotyne, Solodka, Novomykhailivka, Mariinka, Kupiansk. I don't know what that is if it's not an offensive. So it's just accidentally moving forward. So I don't quite know where he's going with that, but unless, it's the idea that now's a bit of a kind of deep battle doctrine where they're kind of probing everywhere, and then there'll be some major push in the summer or spring. I don't know. Again, another bit of footage showing another war crime. Every day I see these, and every day I just get equally enraged. Bastards again shot our soldiers who surrendered as prisoners on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Russians shot 9 unarmed Ukrainian soldiers who had surrendered. You know, if you support the Russians, if you're against the Ukrainians, have a look in the mirror, mate. Have a look at your own moral compass there, because I think you'll find it's defunct. And Vladimir Solovyov receives more than $16 million annually from the Russian state budget. Kremlin propagandist Solovyov was allocated $16 million in both 2023 and 2024 for, quote, information and ideological warfare. Mediazona writes, so they're the exiled independent media outlet, Russian media outlet, citing an investigation by Delphi Estonia, which has obtained access to internal documents of the Putin administration. In 2024, Solovyov was planned to be allocated 32 million, so doubling that, but the funding eventually remained at the same level, the journalist wrote. Earlier, leaked Kremlin documents revealed that presidential administration officials were promoting popular movie projects and state-funded TV series as part of Putin's election campaign, and that's completely as to be expected. Anyway, that's today's rather quicker first news update. I've got a much longer second one due to drop once I record it. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share. Really appreciate your support. Take care. Speak soon.